Good morning. I call the meeting to order. I am Laura Lee Nicol. I'm the chair, and this is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. I'll remind everyone to have your phones on silent, and I'll ask the committee members at this time to introduce themselves, starting to my left.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Trevor Boudreau. I'm the MLA for Richmond.
Good morning and welcome everyone. Tom Taggart, MLA for Colchester North.
Good morning, John A. McDonald, MLA for Hants East.
And good morning, my name is Steve Craig. I'm the MLA for Sackville, Cobequid.
Good morning, Susan LeBlanc, MLA for Dartmouth North.
Lisa Lachance, MLA for Halifax, Little Sable Island.
Good morning, everybody. Braden Clark, MLA for Bedford South.
Hello, everyone. Nolan Young, MLA, Shelburne.
Thank you. And to my left, we have...
Gordon Hebb, counsel to the committee.
And to my right...
Kim Langell, committee clerk.
I also note that sitting back in the corner is the Auditor General's office. And welcome you as well. And on today's agenda, we have officials with us from the Department of Health and Wellness, Department of Public Works, Build Nova Scotia with respect to health infrastructure projects. Nope. So I'll ask the witnesses to introduce themselves, and starting to the left.
I think. Yep. Good morning, Madam Chair, Committee. Dave Benoit, President and CEO of Build Nova Scotia.
Good morning, Gerard, Jessome, Chief Executive of Engineering with Public Works.
Good morning, Chair. Peter Hackett, Deputy Minister of Public Works.
Good morning. Tonya, McLellan, Executive Director with Public Works.
Good morning, Colin Stevenson, Chief of System Integration with the Department of Health.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Committee. Dana MacKenzie, Deputy Minister, Department of Health and Wellness.
Good morning, Derek Spinney from Nova Scotia Health.
Thank you and welcome. And I will now invite Deputy MacKenzie to give some opening remarks.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Nova Scotia's healthcare system is complex and interconnected. Issues in one part of the system often have root causes in another. Action for Health is government's plan to address these issues in a comprehensive way. Making sure we have the right infrastructure to deliver the services Nova Scotians need is integral to this plan. Replacing and renewing aging infrastructure not only improves patient outcomes and experiences, it also helps attract and retain healthcare professionals. The 2024-2025 capital plan designates over $555 million, over 1/3 of the province's capital plan, 37.1%, to health infrastructure. These investments will see the expansion and renovation of emergency departments across the province. They will add more inpatient beds and operating rooms. This will improve our ability to respond to the surgical waitlist in a very positive way. They will create dozens of more dialysis stations. They will provide the most advanced tools and equipment available for our healthcare professionals, in many situations making us national leaders. And they will provide modern, well-designed healthcare spaces for our healthcare workforce to deliver the high level of care they want to provide and the care Nova Scotians expect and deserve. Investments like these, combined with the efforts in recruitment and retention, are making Nova Scotia a destination of choice for healthcare providers, and the right tools and spaces to deliver the best care possible to their patients. The capital plan also reflects the ongoing work and current phases of multi-stage, large-scale projects. The Halifax Infirmary redevelopment is a generational project that will serve the province for decades to come. That project recently reached a major milestone with work on site now underway. This project, along with the Cape Breton Regional Municipality Healthcare Redevelopment Project, will see an investment of over $300 million in 2024-25. These two projects alone help to address infrastructure needs in two of our largest healthcare facilities, in two of our most heavily populated areas. In addition, there is over $108 million for construction and renewal of other hospitals and medical facilities, including projects in Bridgewater, Pugwash, Yarmouth, Amherst, and the IWK Health Centre. State-of-the-art facilities create environments that foster innovation that will keep Nova Scotia on the leading edge in healthcare for generations to come. This includes investing in digital infrastructure, like One Patient, One Record. This year's capital plan sees over $53 million earmarked to advance this important work. Nova Scotians expect the healthcare system to be responsive to their needs, regardless of what door they walk through to access the care they need. Having access to a patient's records improves the care that can be provided and allows the individual to make more informed decisions about their own healthcare journey. We believe the issues facing our healthcare system can be solved while providing a better, more convenient experience for patients and their loved ones. Healthcare facilities are complicated and unique construction projects. They require the coordination of a wide range of expertise working together towards a shared goal over many years. This is an exciting time for healthcare in our province, and the province is committed to keeping Nova Scotians up to date with the latest progress on these important projects. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today to provide the latest information on this work. I will now pass it over to my colleagues for their opening remarks, and then I will be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Deputy MacKenzie, and now we'll go to Deputy Hackett for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. As I said earlier, I'm Peter Hackett, Deputy Minister of Public Works. I'm joined here today by Gerard, Jessome, our Chief Executive of Engineering for Building Infrastructure, and Tonya, McLellan, our Executive Director of Building Infrastructure. Building and maintaining provincial infrastructure is a core function of the Department of Public Works. And this, of course, includes managing some of Nova Scotia's many healthcare infrastructure projects. Building high-quality, modern healthcare facilities is an important part of getting Nova Scotians access to the healthcare services they need. My colleague Dave Benoit is here today to talk about the large healthcare infrastructure projects that Build Nova Scotia is responsible for, while the Public Works team can speak to the projects they're involved in across the province. These projects include the new health centre in North Cumberland Memorial Hospital, which will open soon, the expansion and renovation of the emergency department, ambulatory care services, 12 new dialysis stations, and a new MRI for South Shore Regional, the new emergency department, the IWK Centre, the new MRI at Dartmouth General, and many more, which we can talk about today. Healthcare projects are complex. They take time to plan and build. To add to the complexity of these projects, our economy and the economies around the world have experienced a major shift. We've seen significant inflation, labor shortages, and supply chain disruptions, which have created challenges. Healthcare projects aren't immune to these challenges, and we're working hard to find solutions to keep these projects moving forward. Whether it's trying different approaches to tendering or rescoping a project, we will make sure that Nova Scotians have infrastructure that improves their access to healthcare and helps attract and retain healthcare professionals to this province. These projects are going to change the lives of Nova Scotians for years to come, and the Department of Public Works is proud of the work we do to make them a reality. Thank you, and I'll pass it along to my colleague Dave Benoit.
Thank you, Deputy Hackett, and we'll go to Mr. Benoit, who is the President of Build Nova Scotia, for his opening remarks.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation and opportunity to be here today. Madam Chair, it's my privilege to talk with you and the committee about the work that's ongoing in Build Nova Scotia, Healthcare Infrastructure Division specifically. This division is responsible for delivering the largest infrastructure projects in the history of Nova Scotia, overseeing the Cape Breton healthcare redevelopment and the More Faster Action for Health builds. In short, we are the builder who is delivering integrated construction and operational capabilities and readiness. As a Crown Corporation, we provide a service to our client departments and other Crown corporations, and as we complete each project, especially in the healthcare, we turn the keys over to the owner, which is the Department of Health and Wellness, and the operator, Nova Scotia Health. However, these projects are so much more than about bricks and mortar. The core function of Build Nova Scotia is to strategically transform our province's lands and properties, like the healthcare infrastructure, in ways that drive our economy forward and improve the quality of life for all Nova Scotians. We have a growing population and aging infrastructure. As it relates to healthcare, the work we're doing will not only allow for better patient care and improved clinical outcomes for generations to come, but will provide modern facilities which will support the recruitment and the retention of healthcare professionals. As the builder, we acknowledge the realities of the construction industry, and there are challenges, and we're focused on solutions to deliver against these challenges. Our projects face supply chain issues, labor shortages, inflation, to name a few, as is common throughout the industry right now, across this country and around the globe. These major investments are not just happening here, but they're happening everywhere. Projects of this scale, scope, and size always have unknowns, and minor delays are not uncommon. But we are working diligently and collaboratively every single day to address these pressures, unexpected arisings, maintain cost and schedule, so that our projects will continue to progress. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to deliver for Nova Scotians, and I'm fortunate to have a dedicated and talented solution-focused team with which to work. I have tremendous praise for our passionate, dedicated team, which together with industry and the trade unions are moving as quickly as we can so that Nova Scotians can have better care faster. Nova Scotians are counting on us. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit. And as it is custom, we will go to the Liberal caucus first for 20 minutes, and I acknowledge MLA Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everybody for being here today. So I wanted to start today with a few questions around the QE2 project, and I believe I'll direct these questions to you, Mr. Benoit, and if someone else is better suited, please refer them to that person. And we're going to cover some ground that we may have covered in some other meetings as well, but it's just been difficult for us in opposition, I think, to get accurate information about what's going on with the project. So I'll ask here again a couple of things here. I think a lot of people have questions around, obviously, timeline and cost of this project. So as you said, Mr. Benoit, this is the biggest infrastructure project, not just healthcare, but infrastructure project in the history of Nova Scotia. So at this point in time, is there a updated timeline for the entire project, so we can say in 2027 or 2028 or whatever it might be, you know, we can put down our shovels and we're done with the QE2 redevelopment? Does that date exist somewhere?
Mr. Benoit.
Thank you very much for the question. Projects, of course, if you recall, in December of 2022, we took the decision that the single project kind of delivery model wasn't going to be achievable inside this particular current environment. So we ended up having to look at the most critical parts of the system and focus on those first and deliver it in what was referred to as waves. So we were focused on wave one. Over the course of last year, we started the DPA in May of 2023, which is when we expected to start it. And over the course of the last fiscal year and into this fiscal year, we're continuing on the design and on evolving the costs that are associated with that design. So the other thing we wanted to get started, which we did in fiscal year 23-24, was the enabling works. And so we've accomplished both of those, the two main objectives that we were looking at, or that we needed to accomplish over this period in order to keep this project on track and continue with its forward progression. So we are progressing that. We expect this work to continue into this year and to conclude this year, and then we'll have all of the, more of the, or all of the information that we need in order to make sure that we've got the right project with the right time. And it'll be schedule, scope, and cost.
MLA Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand that work has started. There's certainly a lot of activity on the site there up at the QE2 there. And I realize work has started, but what I'm most interested in at this point as well is when is it going to end? And we touched on the wave concept last time. I think we were talking about public procurement a couple of months ago. So I appreciate we've started wave one. How many waves will there be? And when will the last wave crest, if I can say that? Or when will the last wave finish, I guess, is my question. How many waves are there, and when are we done? If we know. And if we don't know, that's good to know too, but I'd just like to know if we know. Thank you.
Mr. Benoit.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. So on the wave approach, I mean, one of the main reasons why we took that direction was be able to deliver all of the things that were promised as part of I don't remember exactly in December 2022 everything, but all the constituent parts, in order to deliver them, we needed to break them into waves. And so wave one we focused on right away. The subsequent pieces of that puzzle were given to what is known as the Central Zone Planning Team. And that's really important because it really gets started the process, not just of that particular build, but of all of the needs that are required in Central Zone. And we did this as and this isn't actually build work. The planning work is actually not build work. That is work that the DHW and NSH is responsible for. But that information or those additional requirements were passed over to Central Zone Planning in order to start to figure out what is the best way to put them in order that makes sense for the system and makes sense for the needs. But the commitment is that everything that was going to be part of the original build will continue to be part of that, that delivery, just delivered in different waves. And so that work is ongoing now. And it isn't just about the HI. I have to stress that it's about all of Central Zone. So what is Central Zone needs? And then, and so they're working on that now.
MLA Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Benoit. So, based on that, perhaps then I'll ask a question to Deputy MacKenzie or Mr. Spinney. I'm not sure exactly, but so if the first wave of the project here is underway, as we know, and Build Nova Scotia is kind of leading through that, based on what Mr. Benoit was saying, it sounds as though through the Central Zone Planning Team, the subsequent waves are being planned at this point in time through DHW and NSH. So I'll ask Deputy MacKenzie then, how many waves are there beyond wave one, and when will they be complete? Do we know that from the planning team at this point?
Deputy MacKenzie.
Thank you for the question. I'm just going to take a moment to confirm my answer. Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair, and for the question. And in the interests of trying to be as clear as possible, MLA Clark, the reference to the Central Zone Master Plan, and I'll have Mr. Spinney correct me or edit or add where he feels appropriate. So the current contemplation with respect to Central Zone Planning, which is that complementary piece to the waves that are happening and part of it. So the development of the master plan will be completed in two components. Component one is expected to be completed in January 25. Will include the Dartmouth General Hospital, Cobequid Community Health Center, and the existing Nova Scotia Hospital Mental Health and Addictions Campus. And that part of the master plan we're hoping to have completed by January 25. Component two, expected to be completed by the next year, January 26, will include the QE2 Health Sciences Center, the Cancer Care Facility, the MacKenzie Lab Building, NSH Rehab and Arthritis Center, Halifax Infirmary and Maritime Heart Center. So the Central Zone Planning is conceived of as being completed in two different components, the 1 and 2, with the January 25 and then the January 26 to look at those pieces in that sequential way. Mr. Spinney, if you have anything to add there, I'd welcome him to do so.
Mr. Spinney, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that there's maybe a few parts here. There's the expansion that's currently going on at the Halifax, the Halifax Infirmary, and that early works has started. That's the construction that we're all seeing, thankfully, and that particular project has now started. That's the early works that we've talked about. That final contract isn't finalized yet with the vendor. So when are those tractors going to go home and the first patient go into the new 216 beds, the 16 operating rooms, the expanded emergency department? I don't think that there's a date for that at this point, if that's particularly your question. And that's logical given that the final contract isn't signed. So until that's done, it would be hard-pressed for either party, I think, to determine that. In addition to that, going back to the December 2022 More Faster plan, there were two other parts of that that require master planning, and that's the phase 1 and the phase 2 that the Deputy Minister MacKenzie just talked about. In that phase 1 master planning is due to be delivered in January of this coming year, 2025, and that will address Dartmouth General, Cobequid, and mental health. And then the second phase of that, which includes the lab, the VG, and the other components that the Deputy Minister mentioned, would be following a year after, so January 2026.
MLA Clark.
Thank you very much. And sorry to hammer away on this, but it's obviously a big thing, and there's a lot of moving parts. So I want to make sure I have the timelines and everything done or straight in my head. So I'll just ask to make sure I understand. So January 2026, I guess, component 2, as you mentioned there, VG, lab, different pieces. That January 2026 date is for the master planning work. Would that, this is a quick question, but would that I assume that would include design, detailed design of those projects, or no? Just
Deputy MacKenzie or Mr. Spinney?
Thank you for the opportunity. Those dates are actually based on having the infrastructure investments identified by that time. So the detailed design work would probably follow on after that, because once the needs assessment and the planning took place, the requirement for the investment in the infrastructure would be identified with detailed design to come thereafter. That's my understanding currently of the plan.
MLA Clark.
Thank you. And so if by January 2026 we have master planning, then we have to get into what the cost looks like, approvals for all that sort of thing, detailed design. That's very complex. That takes months, I think, at least. So when does the department, or perhaps Build Nova Scotia, whoever would have the ability to answer this, when do we think that we will actually kind of break ground and have construction on that component too? Because if the master planning is done by January 2026, is it even reasonable to expect construction work would begin that year? Like, is that possible? Or are we looking into 2027 at a minimum?
Deputy MacKenzie, but I see you're looking at Mr. Benoit. Who wishes to go? Deputy MacKenzie.
I'm going to ask Mr. Benoit to take this question.
Mr. Benoit.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and for the question. Just, I guess what I would just start by saying that, you know, this is the way that, this is the best way to plan projects, is to identify the need early, and then to go through the process of how does it fit into your actual overall plan. Once the need is identified, you actually have to confirm that it's an infrastructure requirement, because you don't want to build infrastructure if you can fill that need in some other way. If you can recycle, reuse something else, if you can find another way to deliver whatever the need is, then, you know, infrastructure should be sort of the last thought, because it is expensive to build and takes time and expensive to maintain. But in certain cases, there will be, you know, the requirement for infrastructure. It's at that point that the planning team would then say to the other departments that, okay, we have an infrastructure need now, and it needs to get built, and we need somebody to take the lead in order to do that design, that detailed design work. And that does take a while, because you need the input of the clinical staff, you need the input of the patients, we need the input of the families, we need the input of the specialists that are in the province, and often there, and I mean, I'm leaving out lots of people that actually get consulted in this process, but there are teams and teams and teams of folks that are working every day on the HI project, just as an example. Some of that work does get done in the early planning, so it isn't just like somebody just decided, okay, let's put a box here and put that in there. Like they actually have conversations in order to suss that out with the clinical staff, with all those stakeholders. So it isn't, it isn't just, oh, we need something. There's more detail to it than that, but the actual detail about where things are going to go, how they're going to get placed, what's needed in each room, what does the room look like, what's the layout of the room, all of those questions need to be answered before we break down, and that does take time. And so that's part of the process, just to kind of bring it back. So once the planning is done, then that would get handed over, and then people would start to work on that design, that detailed design.
MLA Clark.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that, Mr. Benoit. I know that's true. I remember being in a room 6-7 years ago with former health ministers moving giant Lego pieces I think Deputy Hackett might have been there, moving giant Lego pieces around to say, this is where this building will go, this is where that building will go. And 7 years later, and I don't mean this to be disparaging or critical, but it just, it's hard, I think, for people, just, average everyday people to think that we've come through that much time period and we still don't really know when everything's going to be done and how much it's going to cost. And I think those are big questions. So that's why I raised them today. But I appreciate the answers I got. I also wanted to ask one of those components, one of those Lego pieces that was being moved around really was the Victoria General and the Dixon. And we all agree that those buildings are well past their best before date, and it's really and this is not on any particular government, but it's not a good situation to have people in there. I think we would all agree on that. And the plan at that time was to get people out of those buildings as soon as possible. I think we can all agree that would be the moral and right thing to do. Do we know when those buildings are going to be decommissioned? Is the plan still to decommission them? And if so, when do we think that might happen?
Mr. Benoit?
Yeah, okay. Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. And thanks for the question. I think, I think the question just underlines the importance of Wave 1. And that's because Wave 1 was focused on what are the most critical needs of the healthcare system immediately, and a lot of those needs are captured in the VG. So as far as I know, like as the builder, and I wouldn't maybe be the best person to answer the question about when it would get decommissioned or how, because even after you put up a new building, even if your plan is to transition everyone, there's still a time that you'll need to transition over from the old building to the new building. But as far as I know, the plan is still, at least on the VG, that it would get decommissioned because part of that need is being encapsulated into Wave 1.
MLA Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps then I'll ask Deputy MacKenzie or Mr. Spinney, is there a timeline for this piece of the project in terms of moving people out of the VG and into a new facility? Do we have kind of a window for that important part of the project?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the first part, that as soon as possible. So I agree completely. Couldn't agree more. And there is no specific date that all of those buildings are coming down and something new appears. There is no date for that. What we are doing is we're going through the master planning process that's been outlined to understand what are the needs and where can those needs best be met. In the meantime, while we're doing this, one of the things that we are doing, which is important to understand, is decant what we can and fortify what we can't. And by that, I mean get out whatever can get out. So there are some functions in those buildings that don't necessarily need to be in those buildings. They could be satisfied other ways. A really good example of that would be the West Bedford Transition to Community facility. There are patients in there on the fourth floor in particular that don't need to be there. They could be someplace else. And so that's one of the reasons why we at Nova Scotia Health are very pleased that some of those patients will be able to move within this calendar year and even more after that. There are other functions like ophthalmology procedures that take place in the Victoria General Building that don't need to be there. So we've constructed, a few years ago, we started a private partnership with a private entity that has operating rooms that we send publicly funded cataract surgeries to. And they thankfully are doing a fantastic job there as we work with them on that. Our physicians, our patients, everybody are quite pleased with that. So we are looking to move things out. Another easy example would be interprofessional practice leads. And so we would have clinicians that help train and mentor other clinicians. Well, they may not need their office space in that building. So anything that can move out, we are. So we're using the Bethune building for that. So we actually had media inquiries a few weeks ago that, well, we've heard you're getting the Bethune ready to put patients in. No, we're not. The activity that's actually taking place there is we're trying to get people out of the Centennial building, out of the Dixon building, and move them where they could best be fit. So
Thank you, Mr. Spinney. MLA Clark has 30 seconds left. He wishes to ask.
Sorry, Mr. Spinney, I didn't need to cut you off. I just was running up against the clock, and I just wanted to get this question in people's heads before 40 minutes, another 40 minutes. But also wanted to ask about some concerns about a project related to the CBU Medical School, which I think is a worthwhile initiative. But doctors in recent weeks have raised concerns around capacity and being able to actually manage that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'll come back to it in 40 minutes. Thank you.
Excellently done. And we'll now go to the NDP Caucus and MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would just say that in terms of old hospitals, my theater company created a show in the old infirmary after it was abandoned in the library, and it was highly successful. So don't recommend that in the VG necessarily, but there are other uses for buildings. So I just wanted to pick up a little bit on the planning of like the wave, the whole wave discussion we were having. But Mr. Spinney, you mentioned that the planning for, we can't have a date for sort of when the first patient moves in because we don't have the contract finalized. So when will that contract be finalized? And so then when will we have a better idea of the timeline?
Mr. Benoit? Okay, I'm getting used to reading nods.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the question. And so, that to answer your question, the work that we're doing today and for most of this year and that we started last year brings us to that point where we sign the contract. So it'll be later this year. We expect to be able to have all the scope, all the variables known. So the scopes, the cost, and the schedule.
MLA LeBlanc.
Great. So then, so later this year, that's like, what were we in May? So within 7 months, right? That would take us to December. So hopefully sooner than later. We know that this, with the infirmary project, anyway, that aspect of all of the rebuilds and the work is a P3 project. And so part of the issue that there has always been since the Liberals were beginning this project is the confidentiality agreements in place before anything can be released. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about like the transparency issues. Like how does the government or how do the people have confidence in what's happening without any real information about what is happening? So we know that we've got a plan, we've got certain things available to us, but it takes a long time because of these relationships to know exactly what we're getting into, and for instance, costs. Like we're well into a redevelopment project without having a sense of the cost. So I'm wondering if you can speak to the risks that the government is taking on when these types of agreements are being signed.
Mr. Benoit.
It doesn't have to be you. It could be you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe I'll start, and there may be others that would like to add in about the P3 in particular. So the P3, or what we're known as public-private partnerships, there's lots of they're one tool that we can use in order to deliver on infrastructure projects. And every project that we look at, we make the concerted effort. We look at what is the best way to deliver this particular project. And one of the values of a P3, so I'll just focus in on the P3, one of the values of the P3 is what the taxpayer or what the state gets, what the province gets from the perspective of value for money and value for people. And so one of the tools that we use to make the decision whether P3s actually get started is that value for money analysis, which was done for this project and updated, and it was shared publicly. The other thing that P3s do is it transfers risk to the builder. And so through the process, and it's really been a collaborative P3 process that we've been following, and the difference between the P3 process and the collaborative P3 process, just in general terms, is that you get an opportunity to engage more proactively with the construction agent, and therefore you get the opportunity to understand their constraints. They get an opportunity to understand ours, and then you get a better solution, generally speaking, and at the end of it, a better outcome. On the P3 as well, you have...
Thank you, Mr. Benoit, MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. In terms of the Halifax Infirmary redevelopment, will the province be responsible, or the government be responsible for ongoing maintenance after the construction is complete, or will that fall to PCL Health?
Mr. Benoit.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. In fact, that was going to be my next point, was that, no, that's all right, was that in P3 arrangements, often it's the maintenance, the 30-year maintenance cost that also is part that for the builder to part of their job to do. Why do we do that? Well, it actually provides a better, usually and you know, I mean, I guess you could always find exceptions, but generally speaking, you get a better quality product at the beginning, and after 30 years, you have a better asset when you get to the end of that arrangement. Which case then allows the state or the province to decide: do we keep it? Do we continue to use it as it is? Do we refurbish it into something else, or whatever? So the short answer is yes.
MLA LeBlanc.
Thanks. So outside of the redevelopment, and speaking of maintenance, we've seen a number of maintenance issues at the Halifax Infirmary. We know that there's been the broken water mains and flooding, or broken water mains at the HI, and then the flooding at the Abbey Lane, which is disrupted service delivery. Do we know why routine maintenance do we know why routine maintenance couldn't have prevented this from happening? And were there infrastructure updates needed or scheduled before the water main breaks? I don't know who wants to answer that. Yeah, okay.
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were actually, at the time, the equipment contractors and Progress had already started to replace those pipes. As ironic as that seems, that actually helped us respond so quickly because all of the right piping and whatnot was there. So it was planned and it was underway, just obviously not complete. So yes, is the short answer.
MLA LeBlanc.
So we knew that that the maintenance was needed, and it was just like too little, too late, or whatever. Too little, too late. Okay. Is there an estimated cost for the maintenance work, or for that, and the remediation?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There would be, but I don't have that in my head right now. But we can follow up with that for sure.
MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you. And is there a timeline for the repairs at the Abbey Lane?
Mr. Spinney.
There is as well. I'm not going to quote a date just in case I get it wrong, but it is underway right now, and it's unfortunately, if you many may have basements that get flooded, and then you can see that the gyprock has had water so much, and then you have to replace the whole gyprock kind of things. That's really what we're dealing with on the 6th and 7th floor at Abbey J. And in addition, what we're doing to help remediate that is we're trying to move office space off of the 8th floor and turn the 8th floor back into temporary patient beds so that we can bring back the beds that we lost while we're doing the remediation work that has to take place.
MLA LeBlanc?
I'm going to turn to my favorite topic of late, which is the, I'm just kidding, the Your Health NS app. So Think Research was awarded a large contract worth $49.6 million through an APP. Part of the funding was for the delivery of virtual emergency care in emergency departments. So why was virtual emergency care lumped in with a larger contract to deliver the Your Health Nova Scotia app? I guess that's for Deputy MacKenzie.
I'll go to Deputy MacKenzie.
Chair, this question is perhaps more appropriately dealt with by Mr. Spinney.
That's what I thought. Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the original thought process that engaged us with Think was twofold, or firstfold, I suppose, is just access to care. How do we get more access to care? And we're short both in digital infrastructure and we're short in health human resources. So what Think was able to bring to the table was to help us quickly improve our digital infrastructure so that we can more quickly launch an app with chatbot functionality with workflows, clinical workflows in there. So if you go there and you use the chatbot, it'll ask you questions about what are your symptoms, and then based on that, it will actually tell you where you should go or suggested places where you could go. The other aspect that they brought to the table was a partnership with UHN that would be able to provide physician support through virtual care. And so the original thought was all of that would be potentially packaged through the app. As we worked through that with them, what we learned and improved was that we were able to deploy those resources and that access to that UHN bench for virtual urgent care that we're now using throughout rural Nova Scotia. So we used that same skill set and partnership that they brought to the table. We just used it in a slightly different way. And the general virtual care is being provided through Maple platform, but then there are two benches or two types of physician groups that answer the phone, if you will, or answer the computer now when you call in. If you're on the unattached list, you're receiving care from a Nova Scotian physician who has full credentials, can order all your blood work and see what you need, refer you to wherever you need to go. As I mentioned last time, 80 to 90% of people that phone in are able to have their needs met with that one phone call. The other experience, which is the one that you mentioned last time, was people that are attached can use that service twice a year. When you do that, you're accessing a bench of physicians that are from across the country.
MLA LeBlanc.
Thanks. I just want to stick with the emergency aspect of it for a second. So, two more things about it being in the emergency departments. Like I've talked to, or a year ago maybe, there was a physician here at PAC or at Health Committee who was actually providing care using the virtual aspect of, I don't know if it was this particular app, the app wasn't out yet, so I don't know. Anyway, and she was really excited about it, especially because she can consult with, emergencies in other parts of the province. So given that, number one, when the procurement was done, did it include computer systems for emergency departments to do the actual appointments? And also, but have emergency departments been renovated throughout the province to allow for increased virtual appointments? So like when you walk into an emergency department in Bridgewater, is there a place where you can go to do a virtual appointment as a patient? And has that all been, what have the costs been, what are we looking at for all that stuff?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're learning as we go through that process, and the renovations would be site dependent. And so the very first site that was doing this even before Think Research, and perhaps that's the physician that you're mentioning. I can't remember her name myself, which is embarrassing, but our lead physician in the emergency room at Colchester has been doing this for some time, and she's actually helping us now roll out this virtual urgent care to the other rural sites across the province. So she continues to be a wealth of knowledge and inspiration for us as we're doing this. When you go into an emergency room, the idea is that if you're a good candidate for this, you go off into a different room, literally, at times. And so sometimes there's infrastructure in the site that it's easy, I'll say, and that you can go do that. And then in other sites, we have to make some accommodations. But they're not large renovations. They may be, convert an office space into something different. So,
MLA LeBlanc?
Great. If possible, it would be great to follow up with the committee on the cost of, if you have a line somewhere that is like virtual emergency care, it would be great to get that. We've heard that the measure to address the problem of those without a family doctor seeking non-urgent care in emergency departments, that this is part of that. Is there an estimated timeline for how long the service will be provided in emergency departments, or is the measure here to stay?
Mr. Spinney? Question mark?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Having a bit of fun. I think we heard last time that virtual care is here to stay. And in this particular case, I suspect it is as well. We're doing evaluations through it. So everything is dependent on the evaluation. So if it works, we keep it. If it doesn't work, we fail fast and move on. And the responses on this one have been fantastic. And so based on that, I'd say it's here to stay, yes.
MLA LeBlanc.
So more generally, we've had concerns about the value that we're getting from the $50 million sole source contract with Think Research. Can someone speak to what metrics were used to determine that this was a good deal for Nova Scotians, besides value for people? And can we speak to what metrics are being used to measure the effectiveness? So the what you've just discussed, or what you've just mentioned, Mr. Spinney, what exactly are the metrics to measure the effectiveness of the app?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Think Research is only one part of the app, and relatively small part as well. So an important part because it's the chatbot functionality, but it is just, so just to clarify, that is the piece that they contribute. They also contribute virtual urgent care service through UHN that we're using in the rural sites. So, and also when we quote the $50 million, that's assuming that we continue through 5 years with them, which we have the contract ability not to follow up with 5 years. So the $50 million is a big number, but it's not necessarily what we're spending or what we're going to spend. It's what we could conceivably spend, and that's why you put the bigger number, and then you work down from there. And so the metrics that we use with the chatbot is it being used? So I mentioned last time, for instance, that the stats, I think, again, a few weeks ago now, when I last looked at it, was 100 interactions a day. And then from there, we also survey folks to say, if you didn't have this service, what would you have done? Where would you have gone? So that's where we can do some surveying to figure out how much ED diversions are we actually achieving through this or not. And then in the case of the urgent care that's being provided virtually in the emergency rooms, that's the evaluation of working with both the sites and the patients to say, is this useful for your area? And in some cases, it can be, I won't quote particular sites in case I get this wrong, but it can be that the emergency, there wouldn't be care if this wasn't an option. So those are the evaluations that we do to make sure that this is actually useful and practical and providing better access for Nova Scotians.
MLA LeBlanc, you have about 2:40.
Okay. Are you good if I keep going? Yeah. So, before apps, we had the 811 system, right, where you call and talk to a nurse, which I love as a parent. Is that program still going to be fully funded, or is that going to kind of phase out as the use of the app and the virtual care phases in or becomes more popular?
with Mr. Stevenson.
Thanks for the question. It's not our intention to phase out 811. We recognize that there still is the need for some individuals to, be able to actually phone, talk to somebody versus use the app. There's different levels of comfort. So the effort and the focus really has been working with the leadership within Nova Scotia Health around the Your Health NS project is to actually have our 811 service providers mimic the application. So similar types of processes and patient flows would be replicated within our 811 service so that people have a seamless and similar experience, whether you're actually using the app or whether you're actually using the phone service. The availability of service and service locations and hours of work, a lot of effort put in to ensure that those are accurate through the Your Health NS app. Similar tool is now being used by 811 to make sure, again, that they are giving the same answer, same access to service within the 811 side. And we're certainly, always interested in learning what the 811 experience is through this. So through that contract, we're working with them around what's working and how can we actually tweak and shift what their service is. But it is our intention to continue to maintain some form of a call-in service, which people across Nova Scotia continue to access to have a similar experience to the application.
MLA LeBlanc, you have 42 seconds.
Just a quick clarification. In all this conversation about Think Research, can you clarify, does Think Research still exist as a subsidiary of the company that kind of bought it out or took it over? Can you explain what that relationship is now and who we're actually contracted with?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so what happened was Think Research was a publicly traded company, and one of their lenders acquired all of the shares. And so BD Capital is the name of that third party, the lending party, that bought out all the shares. And so that...
Time has ended for the NDP Caucus, and we'll now go to the PC Caucus with MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Interesting discussions. I come from an IT background, and I would agree. You definitely don't do a project and keep adding on because I've been on projects that took 4 to 5 years. This should have taken 8 months, and I applaud your changes for it. And as this is a generational health infrastructure build that's occurring, and I believe this will be to Mr. Benoit, could you talk about the overall vision?
Mr. Benoit.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the question. I think the vision kind of starts, as I had mentioned earlier, that we've got a number of services that we want to provide in the Central Zone area. The ones that were most acute and the ones that we were looking at most critical, I guess I'll say, are the ones that fit into phase wave 1. And within that, so you've got new operating rooms, inpatient beds, new emergency department. That's really important because the population is growing for the province, as everyone knows. But what was not known at the time when we relooked at the numbers in 2022, the data became a little more specific for HRM, and we found that population was actually growing much more quickly than the population for the rest of the province. And not only was it growing, but it was growing in a sector or in an age bracket that uses those services more frequently. And so we realized that the emergency department as it stood would not be sufficient to meet the need. And so we needed to enlarge, to make a new emergency department, which is part of the reason why that's part of phase 1. The vision then, as I had mentioned, the other parts of that agreement or of that commitment then moved into the planning group, which we've already talked about. And so the planning group is actively putting that together. The dates were already provided by my colleagues, so I won't repeat those. But we're looking forward to that work being finished, because then we'll be able to see what the plan looks like, and we'll be able to and how it gets phased. More importantly, we know what it looks like. We've all got all the constituent parts, but how does it get phased? How does it get delivered? That's sort of the next phase after the planning work is done.
MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Benoit, if you could also explain how the infrastructure is going to actually connect to improve access to health care to lead to better care.
Mr. Benoit.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and for the question. I think it may be a colleague of mine that may want to add in, but I guess what I'd start out by saying is the infrastructure provides the baseline support that delivers the care that is envisioned and needed by the province and by Nova Scotians, and so we take the time to get all the details right to make sure the people who work in the facility have easy access to what they have to do so they can deliver that care on a first rate, as people would expect, first rate, which they do day in and day out today. But we're going to give them better tools for the future. And that's probably the key element there, is that it isn't just about today, it's about what's coming in the future and how do we make sure we can adapt and respond and be able to continue to support their efforts in delivering care to Nova Scotians.
Emily McDonald.
I'm just looking to see if the other side wanted to comment onto it. Looks not. Oh.
I was looking too, but Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. Yeah, just to build on Mr. Benoit, I think you referenced the planning process within the central zone. I think the other component to this really is understanding the planning work and the design work that's been done and the investments that are currently being made around the construction of that site within this phase are driving increased bed capacity and increased availability of ORs as being sort of two of the main areas. And within the bed capacity, it's both from an acute care, so general medicine bed, surgical bed, as well as intensive care. I think everybody around the table would sort of recognize or understand or have heard about high occupancy rates within hospitals. Within the central zone, it's been in excess of 100% within our acute care facilities. So having this structure complete, having this new inpatient tower in this phase of the project done, helps to alleviate some of that pressure. As the deputy had indicated in her opening remarks, everything within the health system is connected. So increased capacity means better flow of people from emergency departments into acute care beds. It means shorter wait times for surgery, and it means more ambulances back out on the road to respond to calls. So I did want to stress the importance of this project and how it will drive improvements within the system.
Emily McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Benoit, you mentioned the significant consultation that's been going on with the health care providers or professionals and communities to ensure that the facilities are going to meet their needs. Could you please talk about these conversations and how it's affecting the builds?
Mr. Benoit.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and for the question. So consultation is really a key element of all of being able to deliver the right project with the right stuff at the right time, and it all starts right at the beginning with a conversation, somebody identifying the need. Go back to the planning thing that I had mentioned earlier. The specifics around the consultation with healthcare professionals, it happens throughout the project. We have Build is fortunate in that we have an integrated infrastructure clinical team that provides that support, and then make sure that they do the reach out to individual specialized teams within the within the Nova Scotia Health Authority. And so these discussions started at the beginning. They are ongoing. We continue to provide updates to them pretty much weekly, if not even more frequent than that. And we get their input on different products. So as we get, as you can imagine, on a project of this size and complexity, you don't wait till the end to find out what you're getting. You get interim reports, but interim reports are still work in progress. And so, but those interim reports allow us to engage those clinical groups, to bring them to the table to say, okay, here's kind of what we're thinking. Here's where we're at with the design. Does that work for you? They'll provide input in terms of, it could be yes, no, it could be more complicated than that. Usually it is. To provide more certainty as the design continues to progress. And so we have it'd be dangerous for me to try and list all of them because I'd probably end up missing one. But the reality is that these groups are engaged fully with the build team and with the NSH integrated build team within the build structure, and we get that feedback on a very frequent basis in order to make sure that we remain on target in terms of what we need to deliver.
MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My last question is going to be, we've had a lot of talk about emergency health care, and I believe there's 7 emergency departments that are doing enhancements, refits, and I'm just wondering if anybody would speak on like what those are and how they're going to help the healthcare. I'm assuming it's going to go down there. So,
I'm looking for a nod. Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Without getting into the details of all 7, one of the general approaches that we're using is trying to create RAS zones. So that acronym, RAZ, is Rapid Assessment Zones. And so by that, what we mean is when you present at the emergency department, if we believe that you're a candidate that could be in a shared location and be seen in an upright position, I'll say, and with others in the room at the same time, that we can put you into a rapid assessment area. And so if you were to present at the emergency department and you were selected for that through the triage process, you would find yourself in a different room with maybe 4 other people. And you're all in an upright position. You've got some sort of ailment that you're able to go through in that space, and that one creates more efficiency because now you're streamlined, more like a speedier checkout, if you will, and also the physicians that are seeing you are able to stay in one physical space of the building and get through a few cases that are more similar more quickly, as opposed to seeing one at one end of the building and then back and forth. And so there's actually a lot of wasted steps that our industrial engineers would point out. So that's what we're doing through these rapid assessment zones. However, it's sometimes challenging depending on the site because we're full, as we all know. And so our capacity to find space within a hospital to actually do this is extremely challenging. And then when we do find space, it could be challenging because of the cost and the time needed for renovations. So that's what we're doing within the EDs. And of course, we're doing a lot of work outside the EDs to have people go to the most appropriate place to begin with. One of the things that isn't talked about much is that our emergency room visits across the province this past fiscal, in the lower acuity visits, they actually declined. And so there's a CTAS score that we use 1 through 5 that you get rated on according to your acuity when you present. So the worst situation is that you're a CTAS 1, which means you've arrived and trauma is needed. So it's obviously a dire situation that's taking place. On the other end, if you're a CTAS 5, it's lower acuity, meaning that maybe you've got a cold or some other ailment that you need attention for, and perhaps you didn't know the best place to go and you show up at the emergency department. The CTAS 4s and 5s have actually declined in Nova Scotia by 9.2%. Which is extraordinary, and what we're trying to achieve. And we're achieving that through many different ways, whether it be a chatbot, whether it be through virtual care, whether it be through urgent treatment centers that we've opened, the mobile care clinics, the expanded scope of the pharmacies. All of these things are having a total impact. So how much is any one of those things having on that number? I'm not sure. I just know that the total number is actually declined 9.2%. However, on the other end of the spectrum, those higher trauma cases have actually increased 9.7%. And when you blend all those numbers together, our emergency room visits are up 1% year over year. So although we're having success on the lower end, not enough, there'll never be enough success on that end, so our job isn't done, but we are seeing an increased level of those higher traumas, which then starts to explain longer wait lists that we're experiencing in some places. So how do you have longer wait lists if you're actually deferring and deflecting visits? The visits we have are higher acuity trauma cases.
MLA McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll defer to MLA Boudreau.
MLA Boudreau.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for coming to enlighten us a little bit today. And certainly, I just want to. I only have a couple of questions to ask, and the first one's a little bit about local community kind of investment, and in particular about dialysis units. So I just wanted to kind of have somebody maybe from the department or Nova Scotia Health to talk a bit about. There's been several new dialysis units that have been announced or completed recently, and just talking about the importance of bringing dialysis services closer to communities, so where people are at themselves. So,
Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think anybody who has to, or knows somebody who is requiring dialysis knows that it is a high volume service. It requires a lot of visits for individuals every week in order for them to receive care and service. And if there's not dialysis stations close to them, it does require travel. And people across this province are traveling in order to receive service. So our focus really has been to look at and work with our partners within Nova Scotia Health as the primary dialysis service provider through the renal program, and ensure that we're identifying hotspots. And by that we mean where there's an increase in population that requires or could require the service, and create the right plan and investment in order to support dialysis stations within those areas and or other options for service delivery. There's been a couple of different approaches that we've been taking within the province of Nova Scotia in order to do that. One is ensuring that there's availability of dialysis chairs within acute care locations, predominantly in a regional or tertiary site, and ensuring that we have some in proximity to where there could be an intensive care unit to ensure that the most sick patients have access to dialysis in a reasonable location. The second would be expanding dialysis chairs across the province. So we've seen a number of investments across the province within the QE2, within the COC, the outpatient center out in Bayers Lake, investments being made in the Sutherland Harris Memorial Hospital, expanding that from 6 chairs up and increasing that. As well as investments on a operational side to expand the hours, because part of using dialysis could be just running extra shifts, so not just daytime, but days, evenings, and going into nighttime as well. So a lot of that will actually create the opportunity for people to have a option available to them closer to home, which is part of what our primary intention is around that. The other is actually looking at partnerships with other service locations. So we've been in conversation with our colleagues and seniors in long-term care around the opportunity to partner for something called next stage dialysis, which is where you can actually have somebody come to a long-term care facility, have a designated room, and they'd be able to dialyze a patient who's in long-term care. So we're working with our long-term care partners to try and create those flexible space. Doesn't require a lot, but actually does bring a necessary service to somebody who would have a challenge in being able to leave their home in that situation.
MLA Boudreau.
Thank you for that explanation. The next question, again, is for the department. In recent years, there's been an increase in the amount of money in the capital plan for medical equipment, as well as repairs and renovations. Maybe someone could talk about the impact of the increased budget has on the ability to maintain existing infrastructure and in a sense, provide better care.
Mr. Stevenson?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'll probably pass it over to Mr. Spinney partway through, just in the sense of the impact within the operational side. But we have had the opportunity over the last couple of years through increased grant funding to be able to take on more projects within the health system. So I have to check the year, I think it was 22-23, it went from 27.5 million for capital grant allocation up to 67 million. We have seen an increase in projects, from 2021-22, we had active about 385 projects within the health system. So those would be repair and renewal, major equipment replacement, plus it can also cover off some operating or capital leases. within that. In 22-23, it was up to 529. So the change in the grant allocation is allowing us as a health system and our partners, Nova Scotia Health and the IWK, as the predominant recipients of those grants, to be able to plan differently, think about the projects, and be able to take on more projects within that. I should add that our foundation partners across the health system continue to also contribute to work within the health system. And they often partner with some of those projects, which allows more projects to get done, and or they take on specific projects that may be of interest to their specific community. And the foundation contribution and commitment to projects has actually continued to increase through the generosity of Nova Scotians over that same time period. And Mr. Spinney may have specific examples that he can
Mr.
highlight.
Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the change in our capital grants has been extraordinary, doubling in the case of repair and maintenance capital amounts from $10 million to $20 million a year, which we're extremely grateful for and helps us do more, obviously, with that. And at the same time, we continue to be challenged in our infrastructure. We've already talked about the Victoria General, for instance. And just to throw out some more numbers, there's 39 plus sites that we actually, the province owns and maintains across the province, which would be about 9 million square feet. So to even at 20 million, I'd say that we continue to be challenged in order to maintain a footprint that's significant across the province. So we're doing a lot better than we were, for sure, and the teams are extraordinary in their creative approaches that we're doing. And at the same time, we're extremely pleased that we're moving into more of a provincial master planning process so that we can better understand what's needed across the entire province. And then we'll see what the outcomes of those master planning sessions are. In the case of the medical equipment, same thing. It doubled from 10 million to 20 million, which is extraordinary. And we still need more. And so, as Mr. Stevenson mentioned, we're extremely pleased with the support that the foundations provide from every community across the province. They actually contribute, depending on the year, between $10 and $20 million a year. One of the most recent, for instance, was the announcement of the new MRI, the relocatable MRI that the QE2 Foundation is placing.
Time is up. Thank you. And we have 13 minutes for the second round of questions, so I'll go to MLA Clark.
You said 13? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And as I said earlier, I just wanted to touch on an issue that's come up, potential issue that's come up recently with the new medical school that's set for CBU. So some doctors up in Cape Breton have raised concerns around capacity, ability to teach and handle the course load and do all those things. And the implication, I guess, or some have said that in other provinces there's been moves to kind of delay openings of med schools for a year or so to make sure that the people are there to execute and make sure that the school functions well. I'm just wondering what's the department's response to that, and is there any consideration to shift timing of that project given these concerns, or what's the view on what some of those doctors have been saying? Thank you.
Deputy MacKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. Short answer is no intention to delay the opening of the medical school, but of course listening very carefully to the concerns and the interest in making sure that there are adequate health human resources, in that case, physician instructors and preceptors, to be able to facilitate the clerkships and placements for the CBU medical students. So on behalf of the department, our interest is to connect, to listen to those. We are actively supporting CBU, of course, with identifying what those issues are and supporting them, and the NSH in terms of identifying resources in a proactive way so that we can be responsive and ensure that the timelines remain in place for the opening of the medical school.
MLA Clark.
Thank you. And so based on that, Deputy MacKenzie, I assume then the department is confident that when the school is scheduled to open, which I believe is next fall, correct, September 2025, there will be adequate resources in place to make sure that, there's enough bodies there to do all the work that's necessary. The department's confident of that at this point?
Well, we're certainly engaged
Deputy MacKenzie.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Thank you. We're certainly engaged in helping to achieve that goal, and that remains the goal.
MLA Clark.
Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to transition, actually, a bit of a segue here, but the medical school at CBU is obviously designed with a focus on rural practice, and there was an interesting article in All Nova Scotia that I was reading this morning around doctor waitlist. And I know we're talking about infrastructure, so I'll digress just briefly, but I will come back to infrastructure, I promise. You know, there's a slight disproportionate number of people in the central zone without a family doctor, about half the overall list. My colleague to my right, you know, I mentioned Halifax Citadel, 23%, Bedford Hammonds Plains, which is part of the area I represent, 22%. Obviously a big issue there, and I believe part of the government's goal to change some of that, although it's been moving in the wrong direction pretty consistently. Last May, there was a release put out about a whole suite of different infrastructure or practices, collaborative family practice teams, urgent treatment centers, primary care clinics, after-hours clinics, urgent care centers, a whole list based on zone. So I just wanted to go through some of those and see where we're at, you know, a little over a year, or I guess about a year after this was put out. So the first I wanted to ask about, and I believe I'll direct these to the department here. There was supposed to be one new urgent treatment center slated for Yarmouth, I believe, in early 2024. Just wondering when that is expected to open.
Deputy MacKenzie.
Yes, I'll just need a moment to confer with my colleagues.
Yep.
Thank you. Madam Chair, my colleague, Mr. Stevenson, will be able to answer this question.
Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. And I should start with, if you have a long list, you might get a bit of the same answer from each time, was I don't know the exact date, but. So for a lot of these, I don't know the exact date, but for Yarmouth, there's a lot, their work continues around the urgent treatment center component. They have been, they were one of the sites, to kind of bring it back to an earlier conversation, which was piloting virtual emergency care. So that was kind of happening within the emergency department to kind of support care. The urgent treatment center, in combination with some existing physician practices or collaborative practices, is still on track and moving forward. Some movement in date based on recruitment, but still active in the plan and anticipated to be open within this year.
MLA Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. Obviously, you may not have all the details right at hand, but I do want to kind of go through some of these other ones. So there was also mention of collaborative family practice teams, and this is something that for a long time we've been talking about in the province as kind of the holy grail of primary care practice, is kind of the collaborative model. And I know my friend and colleague from Clare, Ronnie LeBlanc, they have a great model that's working down there. The municipality has done a lot to make that happen, and I hope that kind of success can be replicated in other areas. But at about a year ago, the goal was to have 8 new collaborative family practice teams established. Do we know how many of those 8 are open as of today?
Mr. Stevenson.
Okay. Announcement from May of, sorry, thank you very much for the question, I apologize. Just grabbing a few notes here. So yes, the announcement in May of 2023 was the intention around 8. To date, there's been actually 10 that have opened. That would be sort of new within that. The intention was to strengthen, so that would be new clinics. The intention was also to invest in an additional 26, which would be sort of on the strengthening. So an existing practice where they were adding additional resources, could be physician, could be nurse practice, a nurse practitioner, nurse or administrative support. And to date, there's been a focus on 49 as opposed to the announced 26. So a lot of that sort of shift or change through the course of the year came as a result of some work within Nova Scotia Health and provincially around primary care to establish a physician call line so that physicians that were within a practice that were had questions, had issues with operational efficiency, were concerned around their practice and the volume within their practice, had a gateway into assistance. So we actually took on, invested in more, and provided support through a practice support program or physician support program to actually help them with their practices. So there's been 10 new opened and 49 additional that had investments to strengthen their practice. So that's within the collaborative family practice side.
MLA Clark.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. The last group I wanted to ask about was urgent care centers. So at that time, a year ago, there were 5. It says 5 more to be established. Just wondering, have we had 5 or more, or what's the status of those urgent care centers?
Mr. Stevenson.
Sorry, thank you very much. There were 8, I believe, at the time of the original announcement. Target was 5 to 6 additional. So far, there's been 2, so we're up to 10 at this point.
MLA Clark.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to have the magic of technology. It makes all our lives easier, so thank you for that. Deputy MacKenzie, I wanted to ask you something that I've heard the minister and the premier talk about a lot. And it's something that I've been thinking about is the issue between access and attachment when it comes to healthcare. And I think that the premier and the minister and others have talked a lot about access as a critically important point. I think they've prioritized that, if I could say that. And obviously access is important. I think there are lots of situations where there are innovations and changes in healthcare that can be really helpful. You know, my son had strep throat recently. We went to the pharmacy clinic. That was great. That was quicker and faster and easier for everybody. But I also wonder if we are kind of losing sight of the importance of attachment. Not to say that healthcare should never change, or that the model of having a family doctor is obsolete, or going the way of horse and buggy or whatever. I don't want to give that impression, but I just wonder if you could give the department's view on that distinction, access versus attachment, and do you think that a laser focus on attachment can lead, or a laser focus on access, I should say, can lead to issues with attachment, because we have seen attachment numbers going in the wrong direction for quite some time.
Deputy MacKenzie.
Thank you. I will begin, and I'm going to invite my friend Mr. Stevenson to elaborate and provide more context as well. I think that it's kind of perhaps focusing on access versus attachment perhaps casts it in a bit of a binary way. I think that the reality of health human resources, particularly on the family physician side, requires us to talk about access in a way to ensure that Nova Scotians can access health care where they need it and when they need it. So the importance of attending to that issue in real time in terms of access is something that I think a modern healthcare system must attend to, and I think that's the minister and the premier have been making that point as well. I don't think the focus on attachment has been lost. I think it's a goal, but the reality of the situation is that healthcare and health needs happen in real time and have to be addressed. So the system has to be able to respond to those needs by providing access and being really intelligent about providing the right care at the right time to an individual who needs it at a particular point in time. So access helps us deal with those pressing needs while we're still striving. Healthcare is always about striving towards attachment, but recognizing that we do have globally a health human resource challenge in terms of the availability of family physicians in particular. I'll turn the microphone over to my friend, Mr. Stevenson, to put him on the spot if he has any thoughts to add on this particular point.
Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. I think to build off of the deputy's comments, really it is intended to find that balance between the two, because if we pursued attachment only, then as an individual who's trying to access care, if you're attached but you can't get an appointment for 3 months, then you're not necessarily in a better position as having no attachment. So all the focus and the work within the health system really has been, as the deputy has indicated, to not think about them as being competing priorities, but really complementary. We've certainly shifted, I would say, language in recent years to help people understand attachment to practice or provider group or to the system as opposed to attachment to one individual. We hear that from Doctors Nova Scotia. We hear that from the Pharmacy Association and others that are in the system of delivering primary care, that really the focus needs to be on team, and that what best serves us as individuals is being able to access the right provider for the right type of care. So attachment to teams and attachment.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Now we will move to the NDP for the second round for their 13 minutes of questions. MLA Lachance.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to go back to where my colleague left off, and we were asking about the current management structure of Think Research. So it's been acquired by BD Capital, and what does that mean in implementation? So is Think Research still implementing? What contact have you had with Think Research or with BD Capital about the Your Health NS app?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the short answer is it doesn't mean much. Our contract is still valid. All the same services are in place. We're doing the same thing. It really didn't impact our direction one way or the other. The senior leadership team at Think Research is the same as it was before, but the structure of the organization has changed. It used to be publicly traded. It's now been delisted because a private entity bought all of the shares. So there's now one shareholder, if you will, BD Capital. So from a day-to-day operating perspective, there's really no change to us. And we talk to Think Research, if not every day, every week. So we're in constant communication with them.
MLA Lachance.
And so what about data and privacy? So who owns the data that exists in the Your Health NS app now?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there is no data in the app. So that's the first thing I'll say. There's no data in the app. So there's nothing to breach per se. So from a technology point of view, to explain that statement, the app is really connecting you to different things. No data actually resides in the app or on your phones.
MLA Lachance.
But just to clarify, in terms of medium or long-term use of this app, I mean, the minister has said repeatedly that she wants us all to have access to our health information. So is there not an intent actually to be able to provide personal data through Your Health NS?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The key word there is through. So you said it quite well right there, where we would access health information through the app as a conduit or a pipe, if you will, but nothing's being stored there, nothing's being stored on your phone. So the trial that's underway right now with a few primary care clinics is allowing Nova Scotians already to do this. And the way that they do it is you need to authenticate. So we worked with our partners at CSDS within government to make sure that the appropriate authentication, thank you, it takes place. And then once you're inside there, then that data is being made visible on your screen through the app, but it's not stationary. Like the app itself really isn't, it's just a pipe, if you will.
MLA Lachance.
So I'm probably going to leave this at this point, but I guess I just would say that I think Nova Scotians need to understand that even like a pipe or like our information passing through something that I mean, for the analogy, that's not leaky, right? Like that, well, the information is being passed, that there isn't sort of a footprint left or, that sort of thing. So, and I think it is concerning that we're relying on this major piece of healthcare infrastructure that is being passed around amongst private entities. So, but I am just going to leave those questions there for now. And I wanted to ask some questions around unattached patients. So I'm obviously very concerned that the number of unattached people in Halifax, Little Sable Island continues to rise. And so I have two questions related to that. So one is, can we tell of the folks who are using the Maple service for unattached patients what riding they're from? So what I'm interested in is knowing, so the folks in Halifax, Little Sable Island, so the almost quarter of the people who don't have access or aren't attached to a practice, are they able to access Maple? Are they accessing Maple? Because if they're not, then a question would be why not? And then in terms of the evaluation of those Maple services, so you talked about the one question being, where would you have gone? Where would you have had your needs met if you hadn't had this service? Are you doing any medium or long-term evaluation? Because I think that question is different, right? Like, where would you have gone if your needs were met in the short term is one thing, right? Like, I have a fever, and so somebody talked to me about my fever, and maybe I got some antibiotics. But it's that follow-up piece and sort of, ongoing complex, or not even complex, just healthcare issues that, are linked and sort of ongoing care. So 2 questions. Do we know Maple use by area? And what is the more fulsome evaluation strategy around Maple use?
Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. So when somebody goes on the registry, there are certain things that they can actually provide. Part of that would be their postal code. So we are able to differentiate people, obviously, on the unattached registry. I think some numbers were quoted earlier, so we're able to kind of see who's there. If we cross-reference those individuals through health card usage or billing data, we'd be able to look at how they're accessing services. So we're not looking at it, back to your privacy, we're not looking at an individual, Colin Stevenson, how he's accessing services, but we'd be able to look from a collective perspective where there are people in certain areas and how they're actually accessing services, whether it's virtual care or whether it's through a pharmacy clinic or whether they actually are attached to a physician because of how a physician is billing for them. And I say that very deliberately because everybody is often very diligent about putting themselves on the registry. People forget that if they do get attached to a physician or a nurse practitioner, you need to remove yourself from the registry. So there will be some people who are on the registry who may actually be receiving care as an attached individual. So we're able to audit and understand how people are accessing care. Mr. Spinney mentioned earlier about the change in utilization of emergency departments and that a percentage reduction in the level 4s and 5s. So part of our intention is to be able to assess deeper how people are actually accessing care if they are on the registry. So are they actually going to pharmacy clinics? Are they going to urgent emergency care? Or are they using virtual care? And if they're using those patterns of services, is it having an impact on their utilization of emergency
MLA
care?
Lachance.
I'm just going to quickly interrupt. So you want to be able to do that, or you are doing that? In terms of that the detailed analysis that you're talking about in terms of pulling, from postal codes and who's using healthcare where and how they're using it.
Mr. Stevenson.
We are analyzing that. We don't have all the results available at this time, but again, as Mr. Spinney has indicated, seeing a reduction in the level 4s, 5s of emergency department visits is driving us to ask more questions around what's driving that and how are people accessing care. So we're in the process of assessing that.
MLA Lachance.
And then just to the second part of my question, which was around sort of the medium to long-term evaluation strategy for your health NS. So, or for Maple actually. So, what happens? Like, are you following up with people, a month down the road? Well, yeah. What's your evaluation strategy?
Mr. Stevenson. I'll go with the Deputy MacKenzie.
Thank you for the question, and I think your question focuses on the idea that the app is following up with people about where would you have otherwise gone other than the app, or the use of virtual care. And the evaluation of the pilot continues, and so I think your question gets at what are we evaluating, and your question is a good one in respect of I think longer term care and what are people doing with response to longer term care, and I think it's an important point to understand that when people receive virtual care, the provider of that virtual care always has the option to, if clinically indicated, refer the person into
MLA Lachance.
An in-person appointment.
And I apologize. I just have a short amount of time for questions. So I guess I might leave this alone. But my question was really like, what are you evaluating, and are you following up with people? At different strategies, different points after they've accessed Maple. I want to switch gears and ask about some of the healthcare infrastructure projects being developed in CBRM and in Cape Breton. So what I understand is that two of the projects, there's 4 projects underway, I think, and that 2 of these don't have contract amounts awarded. And I'm just wondering if you can bring us up to speed on what's happening with those projects.
Deputy MacKenzie to advise who she's passing it on to.
I'm going to ask Mr. Benoit to take this question.
Mr. Benoit.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the question. There are 4 projects that are underway. The first one is the Cape Breton Regional Halifax site, which includes the cancer, the energy center, I've lost it, but anyhow, the clinical care building. The second one is at New Waterford, where it includes a hub concept of a new school, which is nearing completion now, and then a long-term care facility and a medical center combined together. The third one is at Northside, which is a new clinical replacement, really, for the hospitals that exist in that area and provide care for that region. And then the last one is an expansion for the New Waterford, Glace Bay Emergency Department. So the projects that are actively underway or that are actually in their construction phases are the ones that are at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital and the North Side, as well as I just mentioned, the New Waterford school. But the plan was to get the school built first, and then, pardon me, do the demolition of the current school, and then carry on with the program. In Glace Bay, we're looking at the design, and that's still ongoing, of the emergency department. Was there another part to the question?
MLA Lachance.
I think I only have a few seconds left. I'm going to ask, so the new cancer center is supposed to open in 2025. Is it on track? Do we have a precise date for when that will be?
Mr. Benoit.
Thank you very much for the question. And because of time, I'll say that it is on track and things are progressing at the Cape Breton Regional site as expected.
You have a few seconds left. Thank you. Mr. Taggart I will now go to the PC caucus, and I believe MLA Taggart is first.
Thank you, Chair. My first is just a quick question, or series of questions. Department of Health. Central Zone is HRM. Is that correct?
Deputy MacKenzie is nodding yes.
Yes.
MLA Taggart.
And HRM has 50% of the population in Nova Scotia. So we stand to reason.
She's continuing to nod.
So we stand to reason that 50% of the people that are unattached would be fair proportional across the province, because 50% of the population is in Halifax. I just wanted to get that out there. So
So this is for Nova Scotia Health or Department of Health and Wellness. So infrastructure is not always bricks and mortar. We've talked about the importance of new medical equipment, but there's also the digital infrastructure such as the Oncology Transformation Project, the Your Health Nova Scotia app, virtual care, One Patient, One Record, and the partnership with Varian. So I want to go, that's a lot of pieces in there. I really want to go to the virtual care app first, because I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper. And I personally am very impressed with that app, and you know, for somebody that's old and technologically challenged like I am, you wouldn't think that it would be that appealing to me. But I think when I see the success there, I think it's something that we're not really getting the full benefit of yet. But I'm wondering if you would start with kind of give me a bit of a, a solid look at understanding of what that digital care app is doing. I know you touched on it a few times already about, you know, keeping people in the emergency room and that sort of thing. But will you give us a good, I think Mr. Spinney's the data guy there, so maybe you could give us some information on that, please.
The data guy, Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, I think, Madam Chair. It's a great question, and if we had Scott McKenna, our CIO, if he's watching out there, I'm sure he's like, oh, I wanted that question, because it's a really important question, and the infrastructure, like brick and mortar, needs a lot of planning and understanding and thoughtful approach to it. I also agree with your comment that we haven't fully seen the potential of the app yet. We certainly haven't. That's not, I'd be disappointed if we stopped here, is the way that I would say that. An app, like a lot of apps that we have, it's really just a connection to something else. So it's a way to interact with people. It's a portal, it's a front door. There's many different ways that we describe it. But it becomes one single point of contact, if you will, or one place that you know you can go and you can figure out what you need to do using that tool. And so that's what we have. So we have an app now that Nova Scotians can use. Everybody should have it downloaded. You should be able to go to it. And then once in that app, you should be able to understand what services are available where, and you should start to understand what services do you actually need. And we're seeing that through the chatbot functionality, which is really some clinical workflows. What do your symptoms look like? Based on that, here's what we recommend that you should go. That in and of itself doesn't replace a person by any stretch, but there is a certain number that is useful for, and that's all that you would end up needing to want. So even today with the urgent treatment center question, I was like, oh gosh, what are all the different locations? I'm not going to remember that. Well, you could go to the app, and the app would tell you how many they are and where they are, and you'd be able to click a map and see them and find out their hours. And so that's just one of the functionalities of what this is. So as we start to expand that, as we start to say, okay, well, Nova Scotians should have access to their health records. Well, in order to access your health records, as was rightfully pointed out earlier, they need to be stored someplace, first of all. So step one, they actually need to exist digitally. So if you bear with me when we go on this IT journey, so they need to exist digitally. Today, many of our healthcare records are in paper. So they can't be digital because they're on paper, but we're going to make them digital. That's one person, one record. That's a large part of what it's doing. There's a whole bunch of clinical benefits of that too, like closed-loop medication, patient safety, the clinician experience, a whole bunch of other stuff. But sticking to the digital, it creates a digital record. That digital record, whether it came from one person, one record, or the oncology project, or a different project, needs to be stored someplace safely. And so we have created that safe, secure environment using what we call FHIR standards, so FHIR. So that's a standard in the health industry that allows us to connect records for me and you across different systems. So if I'm in the one person, one record, and I'm also in the oncology system, for instance, we need a way to join those records together. and we need to understand the information in the two systems. So we use the FHIR standard to do that. That's a national standard that even I believe the federal government just approved as well, FHIR version 4, I think. And the global environment is going that way. So in many respects, we're kind of ahead of a lot of people. Once you've got that safe, secure environment and the different systems that feed into it can talk to one another using the FHIR environment, then what you can do is you can make it accessible to people. So we can make it accessible for research purposes through anonymized data. So we can anonymize it and then use it for clinical research. That's one of the applications. But we can also then use it for citizens. I can go in and say, well, what do you have about me in there? One, out of curiosity, and two, hopefully to improve my health and for me to play a larger role in my health care. That's the authentication piece. So you need that secure access or swipe card, if you will, to get into that data. What the app does is it just creates the hallway or the pipe into that to be able to bring it out. And as I'm going through that hallway and I get there, I need to present my swipe card or the authentication to actually allow me into it. So hopefully that's a simple way of thinking it, and I know I've oversimplified it. Again, if Scott's watching, he's probably saying, oh, you got most of it right, hopefully. But that's the idea. And it does take time, and it takes a lot of thoughtful attention to make sure that we're using the right standards, that the environment is safe and secure, all the privacy issues that we demand here in Nova Scotia. But that's what we're up to, and the app is a way to connect Nova Scotians to all of these things that we're developing.
MLA Taggart.
Thank you, and I appreciate that very much. It wasn't really where it's headed, but it made like I just want to say, like 4 years ago, before I got elected, we had two doctors at a local clinic in West Colchester, and they were both leaving at the same time. They'd both been around for forever, and all they had was paper records, and we were told that we had to find a way to make them digital, and I was shocked at the time. I couldn't believe it. I thought that if I came to Halifax and had a heart attack, and went to VG or wherever, that somebody could just pull up my records, and I was shocked to find out that 4 years ago, and even possibly today, although I know we're heading in that direction, that doesn't happen. So I mean, I think that stuff is great. But what I was really when I referred to the data piece on the app was the people, the number of people. Like for me, and I think we're most all the same. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I've been very fortunate. Like I've had a doctor all my life, but I can't. If I'm sick today, I can't get into that doctor tomorrow. I can't get in for 2 or 3 weeks maybe. And so I would run off to the emergency room and sit there and say, well, am I sick enough to be here, or where should I be, sort of thing. And so I understand that this app, tells me that I can go to the drugstore, I can go to here, go to there. And you had talked about some numbers earlier. That's where I wanted to go with that app, why I believe that we should all be joining that app so that we can reduce the number of times we go to the emergency room, and sometimes the number of times or the spots that we're taking up in our own doctor's office for other patients. So that's kind of where I want to go with it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I love where you're headed with everybody taking accountability of our care and where do we go. And that's an important question for us to ask to make sure that we're getting the care we need, but also so that others are getting the care that they need. And so we shouldn't be taking a spot at the emergency department if we don't need to be there. If we need to be there, we absolutely should be there, and we should and will receive great attention by our clinicians. But if there's a better way, we need to know about that, first of all, because I may not know. Again, that brings us back to the app to help me understand where else I could go. What are my other options? And through there, you would find that through the PANS, the Pharmacy Association of Nova Scotia, many of the pharmacies actually take online appointments now, so you can click through and actually make your appointment online. For those that are in the app and they are looking for a virtual care session, as you said, some with family physicians, it may take a little while to get in, depending. My family is no different. We're going through that right now, trying to, when's the earliest that somebody could get in? through the virtual care, for those that are on the need a family practice list, you'll be seen that day. And that's actually faster than what I'll get through my family physician. And now, you will end up speaking to somebody that doesn't necessarily have all of your backgrounds. So that brings us back to one person, one record, where we do need for the whole province so that whoever the physician is going in can see everything about me. But you're going to receive care. And if you can't have it resolved, you will be, as the Deputy Minister pointed out earlier, referred and handed into and booked at one of our primary care collaboration centers. So there's between about 400 to 500 Nova Scotians a day that are on the need a family practice list that are using the virtual care experience. So it is, I mean, you take that and times it by 365, like it's a big number of Nova Scotians that are using that service every day.
MLA Taggart with a minute and a half left.
Well, a minute and a half. So I guess I just want to make the comment, where the heck would we be without that, what kind of, as we grow our population and we struggle to grow with it. I mean, it's but the idea that we got 400 or 500 people a day that we're keeping out of emergency room or doctor's office and going to the proper place for care is a pretty huge statement. Is there time to speak about your partnership with Varian? Can you just give us who can give us a little bit of a Mr. Spinney, I guess you're the man.
Well, I guess, Mr. Spinney, we're going down the Varian pipe now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a great partnership. I can't speak about it enough. We should have a session just on that and invite folks into the Innovation Hub and learn more about it. So it's Varian is a oncology company owned by Siemens Healthineers, and they've committed with us to a 10-year project where we're going to work more closely together. There's many aspects of that agreement. One of those is to allow us first access to their most modern equipment. Ethos is something I've talked about before, with their most modern software called Hypersight. So
Thank you, Mr. Spinney. Our time is up for questioning, but I would want to thank each of you for being here. And are there any closing remarks from any of our presenters? I thought Deputy Hackett would just be wanting to say something. Deputy MacKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the committee for having us and asking great questions. Thanks.
Mr. Benoit? No?
No.
I just wondered, is there a desire to have a break while our guests leave? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. I call the meeting back to order. Thank you. So as the committee knows, we have some correspondence, and I just wondered if there was any discussion to be had. We have Mr. McPhee here with the Auditor General's office. If you have any questions. I am not seeing any. So therefore, thank you, Mr. McPhee, for being here. Did you have any opening remarks or closing remarks? Thank you. So as we know, the next meeting is June 5th, and it looks like it'll be in camera for topic selection and committee discussion. So I'll just remind you, if you have anything that you want to submit for that, let me know. And now I'll just say, seeing no further business, the meeting is adjourned.